Good evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Wendell Town Board of Commissioners and welcome all of you who are here watching. We're happy to have you with us tonight. We're going to be led by Police Chief Bill Carter in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. Our invocation tonight from the Wendell Council of Churches, we're going to be hearing from Benny Collins of Wendell Baptist Church.
Can you hear me?
I sure can. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Gray. Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening, Mr. Manager and staff. It's truly a pleasure to be here tonight. Before we have our prayer, I'd like to ask for a special prayer tonight for Errol Brigham and his wife Beverly. Errol recently just got out of a week's hospitalization for a serious respiratory problem, and his wife Beverly is at home in very poor condition battling cancer. So a special, most of y'all, everybody knows Errol, and I think everybody had the pleasure of meeting Beverly last year at the chamber banquet. So please join me for our prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just give thanks for this day. We give thanks for everything that you bring for us, Lord. We give thanks for this wonderful community that we live in, this town. Lord, we just ask that we can continue to give wisdom and knowledge to these very special people who are representing us, along with the staff who help guide and make these decisions. And Lord, what we all need to be reminded of is the decisions that they make are decisions that most have change and importance in our day-to-day lives, Lord. Lord, we just ask you to continue to give them armed with compassion and understanding, the ability to listen and put others ahead of themselves. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you so much. Please give our best to Errol and his wife. Errol's a familiar voice at our meetings. He's practically one of us, so we sure wish him the very best.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight? And if not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Commissioner, poll the board. Commissioner Joyner? Aye. Commissioner Deloach?
Aye.
Commissioner Lutz?
Aye.
Commissioner Tarnaski?
Aye.
And Commissioner Boyette?
Aye.
All right, thank y'all. Move into our public comment period. The public comment process has been provided in advance of the meeting. The public had the opportunity to submit their written comments to the town clerk or were able to submit a request to participate via calling in the conference, both by emailing their name, address, and phone number to the clerk by Friday, October 9th at 5 p.m. The clerk's going to unmute anyone who has requested to speak in the order the requests were received, and you have 3 minutes to speak. We actually have one call-in and one written in, so let's go with the call-in first, and that's Regina Harmon.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam Mayor, Commissioners, everyone listening at home, thanks so much for allowing me to participate tonight. My subject tonight is, parking. First of all, I want to go ahead and say that
Regina, I could hear you louder in the beginning. Did you put on speakerphone or something?
No, ma'am. I'm right here. Can you hear me?
I can, but talk loud.
Okay. Well, me talk loud? Wow. Well, first of all, I want to say that we've got the best community in the world. I've said it before. I'll say it again. And these last few months have proven that over and over again. we've had several businesses open up during the past several months, which has been outstanding for a small town like ours. And of course, with growth always comes a problem or two, but there's always a solution to any problem when you have such great people like yourself and your board willing to put their heads together and figure it out. And, I just want to point out that, you know, prior to the growth we had, we were looking at parking issues downtown, and now that we've got the growth we've got, we definitely have some more parking issues, especially with several businesses that still are not 100% open for the public to take party to. And I would just like for our board, I'd just like to make a suggestion for our board to be looking ahead, so when those businesses open back up, we're ready for it, and we're ready for 2021 with the events and the programming coming. And some of the suggestions I did send in writing, but I'd like to just point them out tonight, if I may. And that is with the parking issues that we're having right now, and possibly the dance school going to a second and third floor, and then the other restaurants opening back up for sit-down. And everybody that's been downtown has seen how, you know, tough it is to find these parking spots, especially if you're a regular trying to come downtown to go to the coffee shop or other places. My suggestion would be two things, really. Just put some signage up downtown and down 3rd Street for limited parking, 30, 45 minutes, possibly an hour in various spots throughout the downtown area, maybe on the corners, things like that. That would be certainly a helpful thing to be able to free up parking for those businesses downtown that only have people coming and going instead of staying for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And then my other suggestion is that new beautiful parking space that you guys have created right there in the alley by Bearded Bee. If you could put up some signage, maybe directing people to the parking lot that you guys have access to over there by Grill Billy's, which would also encompass Grill Billy's into our community a little bit more. They do a lot of wonderful things for our town and do some events over there. So by directing some of that traffic over there and only having to walk half a block back over to our downtown would certainly free up some more spaces for that flow in, flow out traffic, especially, you know, with the growth that we've got, and there are a number of businesses downtown that depend on that open traffic flow where people can come and go. So those are my suggestions. I did put them in writing, and I sent them to the town manager, and I hope that he shared them with you, but I just wanted the opportunity to bring it up, you know, in the minutes prior to a meeting. And that's basically it. I want to thank you again for, you know, all of y'all's hard work, keeping our town flowing in this crazy year we've all been living in.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, the next one is going to be read in by the clerks from Sigurd Westerlund.
The following written public comment was provided by Sigurd Westerlund, 201 Turquoise Creek Drive, Cary, North Carolina, 27513. It reads, I have seen the city management team drive around town lately, so I know items are worked on. Thanks. As I walk to bank or drive to bank or elsewhere, I see dumpsters scattered around town, and I think improvements can be made. Dedicated dumpster areas, okay to me if a bit inconvenient. RE distance if we can consolidate the numerous dumpsters and have them fenced in. Okay for me to pay. Larger, fewer, and more frequently emptied dumpsters. Secure with locks, lights, and cameras. Away from customers, patios, and car and pedestrian traffic. Brad and I removed the unsightly placed dumpster next to 3rd Street Social to help clean up town, even though it would have been nice to have it. Please see the dumpsters on right if way up alley behind Main Street business. Remain alley or future city streetscape. I am adding dining, the only dining patio in town. Agave's dumpster appropriate. The ones dumped on curb next to ATT across from City Hall would not pass my standard. Same on curb next to Bridgers, not acceptable. There are off the beaten track industrial parks where that would not pass muster. Farmers and merchants storing garbage bags on neighboring property that cats and rodents scratch at every night between dumpsters runs in private family cars, not acceptable to either town, I suspect, or Brad and I. A solution is key, convenience less so if we can keep on cleaning up and improving town. As discussed, RE parking, the entire downtown could fit inside a Walmart parking lot, and hence we don't really have a parking problem yet if we can walk a few paces. Same holds true for garbage services if we can't walk a minute with a cart to dumpster. My 2 cents, have a good day. Thanks, regards, Sigurd Westerlin. And that is all for the written public comment period.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Right. All in favor, Commissioner Joyner,
Aye.
Commissioner Deloach,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutz,
Aye.
Commissioner Tornaski,
Aye.
and Commissioner Boyette.
Aye.
Let's move into item 4, recognitions, reports, and presentations. We're going to start with item 4A, continued discussion of downtown service comparatives for parking, food trucks, electric vehicle charging, lighting, and solid waste service. And we're going to hear from the Assistant to the Manager, Stephanie Smith. Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, I am back again this evening to continue our discussion of downtown service comparatives. Presenting this information the past 2 meetings, we have collected valuable feedback from the board. So tonight we're bringing attached policies and procedures that kind of capture that discussion that we've had so far. There is a hard copy printed at each of your spots as we go through each of these policies. We did reach out to all of the downtown businesses that we could locate contact information for to make them aware of this discussion and the proposed policies and procedures that are before you tonight, letting them know of the continued discussion tonight and then the anticipated vote at the next meeting, and encourage that feedback. We've seen some of that feedback come in already. We'll be continuing to welcome that feedback through the next meeting when the board is able to vote if you so choose. So we'll quickly go through each of these policies. Again, the hard copies are in front of you. This is a little difficult to read, but the intention of each of these documents is to capture the discussion so far and then collect any additional feedback or changes that you would like to see in each of these subject matters. So the first one is the food truck policy. This is a policy that captures essentially the process that we're currently following by granting the temporary use of public space for food trucks that wish to operate on town-owned property. We included provisions for food truck permission requests stating that the food truck would need a host. That was something that was mentioned at the last meeting. So somebody would have to request permission to have a food truck brought on premises. This is typically what occurs, but this would prevent food trucks from just showing up uninvited and parking and serving food. Property owner permission, again, this would be the use of public space letter that we're currently utilizing to allow food trucks. Applicable licenses and permits, this again is captured in that letter where food trucks would be required to have any health department regulations or requirements in addition to that approval of use of space. We always reserve the right to revoke permission with written notice to the food truck vendor or the food truck host. In terms of the actual operation, we included the provision that food trucks would only be permitted to operate on Campen Street and Depot Street. This would eliminate the ability for food trucks to operate on Main Street. We also included a provision where they would have to be located at least 100 feet from the main entrance to any eating establishment or similar food service business. Written permission would have to be provided by any eating establishment if a host requests to locate a food truck within 100 feet of that entrance. We included some time limits, so they couldn't be a 24-hour food truck. Food trucks would also be responsible for any trash that would be generated by their operation. They would not be able to obstruct traffic, and we would strongly encourage the use of quiet generators. So I'm happy to hear any changes or feedback before this comes back to you for consideration to vote at the next meeting.
I'd like to do more than strongly encourage the quiet generator.
Okay.
If we're going to do anything, that's problematic. Anything from the board?
I'll go a step further, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Boyette. If they are parked in a parking space that has available electrical service, I don't think they should be running a generator at all. I mean, we're basically providing that service. And I have noticed there have been a couple of food trucks who have parked blocking the electrical service for both electric vehicles and for food trucks specifically, and then run a generator. And I understand that they're used to using their own setup and all that kind of stuff, but it does sort of seem to defeat the purpose. And so I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and I guess, I'm sorry, I guess I'll go off that. If they're parking in front of the beer to be at those locations, then I think electricity should be required. If they are unable to have electricity, or they're not compatible with that, then I think maybe over on Depot Street is where they should go. That would be my kind of thought. I think most people are going to want to be right there in front of the brewery, and so I think in those cases, electric hookup should be used, absolutely.
Okay.
And this wouldn't interfere with Grillbillies. I know sometimes they host food trucks in their own parking lot. This wouldn't affect that, would it?
Correct. This is only for public property, and
Okay.
Grillbillies holds their food trucks on private
Just
property.
making sure.
Questions around, thank you, Stephanie. The first question is around the host piece. It lists business, nonprofit. So if I'm the Wendell Chamber, let's imagine for a second that I'm the Wendell Chamber of Commerce and I'm not in the DMX, which I think they are, but well, I guess what I'm getting at is how broad is that definition of host? Are we assuming that host is, I could make that, the lobbyist in me can make that the broadest of broadest definitions to include a nonprofit that did nothing but hosting. And I know that that's not the goal, but also I appreciate the breadth of the language, but want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. So when we get down the road, it's not specifically my concern being you don't own brick and mortar down here, thus you can't be the host.
So the intention, it's a good question. The intention of the provision would be to prevent food trucks who come uninvited from operating in that space. So this is meant to capture the chambers, the nonprofit organizations that are maybe hosting a fundraiser or hosting an event downtown, as well as the town, to allow food trucks in that space.
Yeah, and I just add, it is public property, and depriving the use of public property to any individual could probably be problematic from an equity standpoint. Another point you raised by that is outside of Campen Street and Depot Street, we might want to have wording about a permitted special event location can be outside of that. There's certain events where selling food down at Women's Club lot and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or Cypress. So if it's a street closure associated with a special event, an approved special event, it could be outside of that.
Well, like the community center.
Yeah.
Something may wind up down there for some fashion, so.
I guess, Commissioner Loach, I guess my question comes in where Commissioner Joyner says a host. Should we require a local business host? I just don't want to be problematic for you guys if somebody shows up and,
We could,
hey,
yeah.
I've got this letter from a host, and we might just need to dial that down some.
Yeah, and we could specify the locality of the type of host. The permit process does require 14-day notice, and it still also requires an approval letter for that use of public space. So we feel that that provision would be captured elsewhere in the policy, but to prevent somebody else from another jurisdiction or another part of the area making that request, we could specify a little more clearly that we intend it to be for Wendell businesses, nonprofits, similar organizations.
And I guess my main concern is not to really overburden town staff. You know, I mean, if we're creating the policy, I'm assuming that we're, you know, thinking ahead to the point that we don't want to bog ourselves down. So how, you know, this should flow, if it's a 14-day process, you know, can we go ahead and lock people in for, you know, a month ahead of time or 2 months ahead of time?
Right, we currently give use of public space letters for recurring dates,
Okay.
so we would continue to do that. This process would be streamlined in that the intention is to put maybe a form on the website that people could fill out to submit that official request. Right now, it's a little difficult to find exactly what you need to do, and people are typically just sending an email with the request, and the email might not contain all the information that we need to be able to consider, so that form would include all of the information that we would need from that host. So the intention of the process isn't to necessarily change exactly what we're doing, but just to make it a little more streamlined and easier to navigate.
Okay. And then a couple more things too, just, and I think Commissioner Boyette touched on this last time, and Commissioner Lutz and I talked about it a little bit, but just if we're parking food trucks in front of the electric car stations, it's kind of, and theoretically blocking other parking spaces too, it's kind of taken away from, you know, what we meant to do there, I think, in some cases. So I have been where the food truck was parked behind Bearded Bee in the little cutout area.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed to work well. And then maybe the you know, the feed out lane that goes back behind Perry's, you know, maybe we can offer some sort of extension to the power so we don't have the generator issue, but also not block the, you know, half dozen parking spaces there with the food truck.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. Up to this point, we haven't specified exactly where we would require food trucks to park on that east campus space. Since it is a new space, we're still kind of learning the flow and how that functions. And so we'll talk about this in a second when we talk about electric charging stations, but I think staff's intention is to sort of observe and see what's working, see where modifications can be made. So we didn't want to put language that was super restrictive in this version of the policy, so that maybe we could come back at a later date and include something where food trucks would have to be parked here first, then here second, to make sure that that parking and that charging station is available.
Gotcha. Because, you know, I'm pro food truck. I want to make that clear. And, you know, I think food trucks create destination travel for people. I've had numerous conversations with folks that just are here because of, you know, XYZ food truck was here. We love it. You know, hey, Wendell's great. Never really knew all this was here. So I think there's part of that. And I'm also, and I know we've not discussed fees. I am in favor of a fee. I know we've, you know, not addressed that here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that might feed more into, you know, what we're talking about later tonight, which is, you know, some grant programs and that kind of thing in downtown. I think a fee structure for food trucks might actually help with investment in our downtown, especially if they're going to be utilizing the space. So I think we need to consider that.
Okay. The intention was to adopt the policy that kind of captures what we're currently doing. And I think the original intention would be a potential fee would be incorporated into the fee policy that would be adopted with the next budget cycle, unless the board feels differently and wants to implement something like that sooner.
Okay. Because any small fee, you know, if you're any sort of food truck worth your weight, you're going to accomplish that in a very short amount of time. So I don't think that's going to be a hindrance to bringing food trucks to Wendell.
It would be my preference to not wait and see on the exact location of where to park them. I would really not like them taking up parking places for cars. I mean, I know the need for parking is a good problem to have, and it's a new problem for us because we haven't had it for very long. But I can't see parking a food truck taking up 5 or 6 spots when it could just move from here to here and not take up those spots. Okay. So that's something I'd like to go ahead and take care of now. I don't think we need to wait and see. I think we know now. Okay. So, does anyone else have anything to say?
Is there power in that spot you're talking about, by the Bearded Bee? Does it have power there yet, or no?
Not currently. I think there's the plan for an additional hookup And that third
The power's
kind
not activated yet, that's
Yeah.
part of why they're parking the way they are
Yeah.
as well.
But there is gonna be power in front of the BRV where you're talking about parking, the food truck?
I'll double check and report back on that. And just to clarify that the electric car charging stations are not electrified yet. That's the final step, is undergrounding the utilities and getting those hooked up. Duke is scheduling that now. The charging stations for the electric vehicles are also designed as food truck hookups. So it has a multi-purpose. So the space is designed to be flexible. So you'll want to think about which spaces are used in what frequency for what kind of events. So if you're blocking off that whole camp and row area for a special event, then you might want 3 or 4 different food trucks in there for that event. If it's just a regular recurring, then it might be the one over on the side in the little cutout, and we'll make sure
Yeah.
electricity is put
Okay.
there.
And-
So
And I do agree, my thought process was for an event, totally different deal.
Yeah, that's a whole new,
3 food trucks, we don't need the parking there because we're not gonna have parking there, we're gonna have foot traffic there. So, if we're just going single food truck to enhance, the experience in downtown, then let's find a spot. And again, drop cord to the power, we'll still provide the power, but let's not take up the parking spots.
does anyone else have any, I've been hearing a lot of, do you have anything?
I'm just not in agreement back here.
Okay.
And
Commissioner Furniss, did you
that was the
say-
only thing about the power, and I say no fee at this time. I mean,
Okay,
I do, Madam Mayor.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to echo on the fee, and I'll give Commissioner Tarnasky one. This fee might be able to offset the cost of the electric charging stations if only you park the food truck in it, in the electric spot on Friday night. So I think being open to that is a good thing. The other piece is that if we're going to be in the business of managing food truck schedules, food truck locations, food truck cleanup, power supply for food trucks, the sound level for food trucks, then I certainly think that we have to capture that in a revenue, because otherwise we're just asking taxpayers to pay for all of that. The only other question I had, the limiting it to Camping and Depot, and I understand that we haven't seen a food truck not on Camping and Depot in a while, and I also understand that the DMX district is small. I'd suggest that if staff and Mr. Colley, when y'all look at that piece, the flexibility that is sometimes granted in the last sentence of all good ordinances, which is discretion to the manager. It might not be an event, it might be a really logical reason, and I'm thinking Saturday morning food truck, and I want to be at Town Square because there's going to be space for people to socially distance in Town Square and have the mini donut. There's a really great mini donut food truck, I'll tell y'all about that later. But just a location that at early in the morning may not be the best option, giving you guys the discretion to say, hey, this is completely fine, this food truck by the town square at 9 a.m. on a Saturday isn't a need for us to come in and have some sort of formal vote of us or to rewrite a policy to try to fit this one-time thing. So just ask that y'all look at it and make sure that you have enough flexibility there to kind of accommodate those. I would imagine the person that gives you notice in 12 days instead of 14, which is apt to be me. I think that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Okay, all right. Is that everything you need about food trucks?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, move on.
Next is downtown parking plan. The Code of Ordinance authorization, the plan outlined below fall under the authority of the town manager as stated by the following. So we just name the specific part of the code that gives the manager the authorization to implement some of the recommendations that we had discussed at previous meetings. So that would include the signage, striping, and enforcement to evaluate areas that need to be restriped or striped that currently aren't, signage to help people direct them to parking areas, and then evaluate the addition of the no parking zones, the restricted limit parking. We discussed 20 minutes, we've heard up to 40, 50, 1 hour. And then also the enforcement, so working on the education effort where we currently observe issues with people parking where they shouldn't be parking, helping route those individuals to park appropriately and legally. Any feedback or questions for this one?
Any questions or comments from the board?
My only comment, Commissioner Luce, my only comment is on the timing. I know that's been discussed. To me, if it's going to be a timing situation, it's going to have to be short. If the real purpose of this is to allow people to get in and out somewhere quickly, you know, I mean, 15 minutes would be the max. But then again, it's a very hard thing to enforce. And so I'm just not really sold on the time limits yet. So that's my only thought on that.
I will say, Commissioner Deloach, the part I struggle with in enforcement for a parking plan in Wendell is most places you go, the parking is enforced during business hours up until a certain, whether it's 6 p.m., 5 p.m., 8 p.m., and then there's no enforcement after a certain time or on weekends. And I think what we're in need of is something that is the exact opposite of that. And I think that's where the tough part comes in. I mean, I ride through all hours of the day. I don't see an issue during the day. I don't see a large issue at night. But if you're trying to limit spaces time-wise for people to run in and out for food pickup or whatever the case may be, are we enforcing that at night? And that's, I don't necessarily have a solution. That's just a comment, but that's where I struggle because we almost need to flip that, enforce at night, not during the day.
Okay.
And I don't know that we really have a model to look at for that in other municipalities, unless you know of something else, but.
Maybe Mark or the chief can speak to that.
So, I think you have an ability, if there's a demand for a particular time or use of an area, you can establish parking regulations to match that use. So if you're a county seat and you have the county courthouse, then court hours tends to be the time people flood in. You might also have after hours business in which certain streets are regulated certain times. I think where staff is kind of what you see before you. It's more the identification of the plan of are there easy, affordable ways to add additional parking signage without getting too heavy into the enforcement side. My experience is that enforcement comes with staff needs or outsourcing. Neither of which our downtown generates sufficient levels of to have a robust enforcement program yet.
It's my thoughts that more than likely, and I want to defer to the manager and the staff to come up with something that they think they can enforce that meets our needs and creates a few in and out quick places. And I'm going to rely on the fact that if y'all send that to us, you can enforce that. I feel like that's a fair assumption. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
I got one thing.
Okay.
Commissioner Tarnaski.
Commissioner Tarnaski?
I didn't see anything for like any more handicap or senior parking. You know, they have a harder time walking to get to the downtown things. You know, there's not as many handicap spots I noticed downtown.
So any accessibility issue would be addressed through the ADA transition plan, which the board has put funding in the current year's budget.
Okay.
So when that's developed, there's a 3-year period that you develop your transition plan, and we're in year 2 right now. Then we'll start implementing that plan. So as we do improvements downtown, we'll be required to update accessibility components.
And they'll be incorporated into at that.
It'll be budgeted in future budget years, and it's done over a period of time. It's hard to for any community of any size to bring an entire community in accessibility if you've been here, over 100 years like Wendell has. But yes, sir, that does get addressed with the ADA transition plan implementation over the next few years.
Okay, because I just had a concern, one of the people down there trying to get to the layer, the tailor shop area, maybe having a handicap spot right across from the bank, where they can kind of just roll up into there, just put a sign there, that's all you gotta do for now, give them a spot, so they have a spot to get into the, to that side of town, because there's steps are there, so anyway,
Yes,
thanks.
Just a comment, I think that we're in a pretty good spot right here. I understand, the desire for enforcement, and I see, those temporary short-term spaces as kind of being us dipping our toe in the, water on enforcement. I think it makes it, in my opinion, doing a limited number of temporary spots with signage, does two things. We, on a routine basis, have 3 police officers. If there's a call that was to go out, and let's just say it's a domestic dispute, that's at least 2 of those officers. We have an officer capacity issue. Doing a limited number of spaces, and I know that Commissioner Tarnask and others have said maybe the spaces closest to the fire zone in the center will reduce our enforcement, or reduce what it takes for us to enforce it, because if I'm an officer and I know that there are 5 spots that I need to check to make sure that the last time I rode through, the same cars aren't there as when I rode through a half an hour ago, that makes it less of a cumbersome process. So I appreciate where we are there. And the other piece, and I'm imagining that Commissioner Boyette will agree with me in part here. Part of this is just how we're looking at it, and people can look at where you park in proximity to how you get there. We stopped to get food at a food truck Friday night. Bearded Bee was at capacity. They had plenty of folks there. So we sat on the new bench that's outside in front of the golf cart parking spaces, all of which were full, and got to hear the conversation of people walking by. There was a lady and her husband on the phone, and they said, well, we parked down by the car dealership, and we thought that we were here, but it's a really nice brewery. Oh, wait, no. Oh, you're at 3rd and Main. Oh, okay, well, we'll be right there. Now, to this couple, who I have to assume is not from the corporate limits of Wendell, parking just up the block at a car dealership that's all but empty at that time of day, and walking down 1 block was not a problem. And when they found out they were actually a block off, that also wasn't a problem for them. I think as our downtown grows and we get more dine-in centric things, I heard Ms. Harmon mention that earlier, when we get more dine-in centric stuff, some of it is going to be knowing where to park. The other piece of it's going to be just reframing what that parking looks like. In the mornings, you're probably always going to have trouble getting a spot in front of Petey's. You probably won't have trouble in the mornings getting one in front of the ice cream spots. And at night, it's going to be the reverse. So there's only going to be so much we can do unless we're committed to paving a lot more things in downtown. I know that we're committed to parking. I know that we're committed to our downtown. I don't know that we're committed to paving all of the downtown for parking. I feel like this is a really good starting point. I feel like it gets our toe in the enforcement game, and I think it'll be a good position for us to revisit and come back to if we evolve to a place we don't like. It certainly seems like a good starting point for me.
Good? You got everything you need now from about parking? All right. Solid waste.
Solid waste is next. So again, we're capturing what we're currently doing. The dumpster locations service existing businesses. Businesses will continue to be responsible for finding ways to dispose of trash and recycling individually. As growth continues and conditions allow, dumpsters will be added as part of future budgets. So future usage, the phased plan would be to incorporate additions in future years as growth requires. Small cans would continue to be handled by town staff. Dumpsters would be emptied by GFL. Businesses who participate would be responsible for bringing trash to the dumpster locations. Dumpsters can only be placed on by businesses on their property in a manner consistent with our ordinance. An example would be approved enclosures. Dumpsters cannot be located in right-of-way. Otherwise, businesses can utilize the dumpsters that the town provides in the future. And then we identified the 2 locations that we would be adding to the existing enclosure and then creating a new location at the Women's Club lot.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I would say, Commissioner Loach, we've heard it tonight in public comment that, you know, at least one individual is okay with paying. You know, I made the comment last meeting about partnering with business owners, so I wouldn't necessarily delay it unnecessarily if we have a partner that's, you know, just wants the opportunity and perhaps is willing to supplement or offset.
Anything else from the board?
One quick, so is the current language in the UDO, or the current language, include the enclosure language? So like if I would have had to put an enclosure around it before?
Yes.
Okay. I've heard feedback since our last meeting from a couple different business owners, and everyone agrees that this is an issue that continues to pile up and is one that they would like moved on. I certainly feel like I'm in favor of moving towards a policy that includes all of the options that you brought us, primarily because we're going to be relearning a way of doing something, and I think that when we relearn things, it's best if we're not trying to get you to relearn 3 different pieces as we can afford it. I appreciate the policy, and I would encourage us to look at funding it so that we can do enforcement around these things when things aren't not sightly in downtown, because we're providing an option that once we provide that option for it to be cleaned up and for these things to be taken care of, we can, if we're going to have a policy, we need to have a policy. If we're going to regulate that, we need to provide options. We've got a list here. It is quite possibly the smallest dollar item list that I've seen in recent history. I'm all for attaining the attainable. This seems like an unattainable thing that we can do to help.
For transparency, the cost on the dumpster items isn't necessarily the enclosure, it's the service provision that can get into the lower tens of thousands annually if it's a weekly service with several recycling and trash service. So the cost is an ongoing operations cost more than the capital cost.
Any other questions or comments about the solid waste service? Okay.
Next, electric vehicle charging. As we talked about earlier, we have 2 electric vehicle charging stations on East Campen Street. Once they're electrified, the recommendation would be to provide the charging free of charge to those traveling in the area. We would use this next amount of time to monitor their usage and then monitor options for potential revenue source based on frequency of use and the plans for future charging station additions. So for the future usage, we would seek opportunities for future charging station locations, which we believe at that point would support opportunities to generate revenue once we have more charging stations and we have a better understanding of the frequency of their use.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? Kind of covered a lot of that already in the other.
All right, last but not least, downtown lighting. We've talked about this several times, that we have 49 lights in the downtown district that we currently own. The goal would be to convert all of those lights to a lease. We would incorporate that within other strategic initiatives and capital projects, and possibly time the replacement of those lights with a streetscape design improvement. So board pretty much gave us a head nod at previous meetings, but just wanted to include it as one of the 5 topic items for transparency.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to item 4B, facade improvement grant update. We're going to hear from Planning Director Nikki Jones. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Tonight, we wanted to provide the board a quick update and get a little bit of direction as well. So we wanted to provide an update because we saw kind of a spike in interest in the facade improvement grant. So a quick overview, the goal of the grant is to provide an incentive to business or property owners to essentially just fix up the facade, and specifically in the downtown business district. These improvements should demonstrate a significant enhancement to the appearance and aesthetic of the business. Currently, the maximum amount one business owner or property owner can get is $10,000. That also just so happens to be the line item budget for the facade improvement grant. There's a 50-50 match required. So in the policy, it notes that once the funds expire, we shall, come back to the board and think through the next steps, essentially. Just wanted to make note here that grant amounts are based on allocated funds available. So we've received several inquiries over the past couple of months, and some of those are pretty immediate, meaning that we have seen actually in hand 3 applications. In addition to that, we've also had some inquiries from other businesses talking about they want to utilize the facade improvement grant. They're not super concrete in the sense where we have applications like the immediate ones, but we feel pretty confident that they will be coming this fiscal year. Again, just want to be clear that there are no funds that are identified for this budget line item, and if we were to somehow be able to fund the facade improvement grants, we would have to get them for the general fund reserve. So at this time, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board about that facade grant?
Commissioner Deloach. A couple things. I'll just revert back to my comment about the food truck fee. This would be a good opportunity there, even though I know we don't necessarily like to earmark dollars. But I do have a question. If the program itself states that amounts will be based on allocated funds available in the budget, do people give a reason why they are submitting later in the year? Right? Because they're not able to make the match? They don't have the work approved? Or
Currently, we have an open cycle. We can think through whether or not we have 1 or 2 cycles a year, but at this point in time, it's open. So, kind of when somebody has a project, they'll submit for it.
Currently, it's more or less a first come, first serve based on what funds are there.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's much like it's something you might do at your house, whenever you're ready.
I believe, if I recall from prior board discussion, there was a encouragement of staff that if we create a problem by not having enough funds in the budget, to make you aware of that, so you would have the opportunity to have the discussion and give us a head nod to proceed with bringing additional applications, or to inform new applicants that will have to wait till next year. So any discussion about bringing the applications for your consideration or not would be helpful to staff.
So I would, I think, having proffered at least half of that statement, say that, I think, so this board, since I've been on the board, we've put this in a budget, we've taken it out of a budget completely, and we put it back in all at that $5,000 or $10,000 mark. I certainly think this is a good indication that we need to keep that number there in future budgets. I would ask that staff do like you always do, which is identify the greatest amount of work the application process like you normally do. And then I don't know that staff or the rest of the board feels the same way that I do on this, but until we have a new budget, as long as those applications are coming in, let's weigh the merits of each of them. Let's let this board, I don't know of another option around that, but weigh those merits. We are going to be looking at the general fund, which is the savings account for those of you playing at home. So I feel like that's a decision that we can make. I will say that we had some missed opportunities in the year that we didn't have it. And then the times that we've gone through a process that seemed very process-centric, we spent $5,000 and we got a $5,000 outcome. There's been more recent times where we had a little bit more money to play with. We addressed an immediate need that I wouldn't have thought of the year before, and we got great results on that. I don't want to miss on the next one main. I don't want to miss on the next big thing because we're not ready to act on it due to a budget number. Don't let that slow y'all's efforts down. It very well may not pass muster across the finish line, but I certainly think until we fund it or have a better understanding of what that long-term funding should look like, that we can be the ones to take it on the chin, for lack of better terms.
So the answer to those who are interested from Commissioner Joyner is, let's hear them, and the board might be willing to fund it anyhow. Anyone else? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Commissioner Karnowski?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I think we
Great.
will bring them to us.
Thank you so much.
Sure. All right, let's move into our public hearings. I'll tell you a little bit about the nuances of these virtual meetings that we're having. The public process has been modified in advance of the meeting. The public had the opportunity to submit their written comments to the town clerk, or were able to submit a request to participate via calling in the conference by emailing their name, address, and phone number to the clerk by Friday, October 9th at 5 p.m. The clerk's going to unmute anyone who has requested to speak in the order their requests were received. They have 5 minutes to speak. The board will not take action on these public hearings, and then will take action on the 26th, 2020, according to statute. You have 24 hours after this meeting to submit additional public comment to the town clerk. We're going to hear in this first one, let's see, this is a public hearing for a non-contiguous annexation petition A-2004 for 61.43 acres located at 1129 Edgemont Road, 1213 Edgemont Road, 0 Edgemont Road, 0 U.S. Highway 64 East, and 0 Merganser Road as identified by PIN number 1775 70 5631, 1775 71 4047, 1775 60 5854, 1775 51 9103, and 1775 50 65 28. We're going to hear from Assistant Planning Director Brian Coates.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening.
Yes.
Thank you also for reading all those PIN numbers.
Well,
The item before you tonight is the first item is a public hearing for non-contiguous annexation for 61.43 acres. The next public hearing is actually for the development plan for these parcels. One of the parcels in the development plan is already in our city limits, but these 5 parcels are in Wake County's jurisdiction currently. Wake County jurisdiction, just north of the existing Edgemont Landing neighborhood and just south of I-87. If these parcels were annexed, the area would require service from the town police and public works department. The utility extensions for the project would be constructed by developer and maintained by Raleigh Water. And do you have any questions on the annexation?
all right, let's open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to be heard?
David Arnold, would you like to speak?
Sure. This is David Arnold with the Now Company. So we're looking to put in 202 single-family lots, only properties. If you have any questions as you previously looked through this or are looking through it, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, any questions from the board? For the applicant or the Assistant Planning Director? All right, we'll close the public close the public hearing and vote at the next meeting.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Item 5B is a public hearing to consider a request by David Arnold of the Now Company to rezone 70.43 acres of property along Edgemont Road within the parcels identified by PIN number 1775-51-9103, 1775-50, 6528, 1775-60, 5484, 1775-70, 5201, 1775-71, 4047, and 1775-70, 5631 to an R4 conditional district for residential development. Okay.
Yes, so this next public hearing is to create an R4 conditional zoning district for a neighborhood identified as Harmony Landing, which would be just north of Edgemont Landing. The applicant's proposing an R4 conditional district. It will feature 202 single-family homes on 70 acres. Based on their application, the applicant's proposing an R4 is consistent with the adjacent Edgemont subdivision to the south. Even though Harmony Landing will be developed by D.R. Horton, who is the same builder of Edgemont Landing, they will have it's a separate subdivision with its own amenities and HOA. They'll be separate. According to the UDO, the open space requirement is roughly 8 acres. The applicant's providing us 24.7. To give you some background on the geography, it's the west side of Edgemont Road, with the addresses Edgemont, and the parcels that have a 0 in front are just parcels that do not have any buildings or anything on them as of current zoning. The parcels in Wake County's jurisdiction are R30, which is a residential subdivision. R3, there's one parcel that's been annexed into our jurisdiction that will, if the proposal occurs, will all become R4 conditional district. The request is roughly 70.43 acres. The property owners submitted annexation and development plans. The applicant is David Arnold with the Now Company. Surrounding districts and land uses to the north is vacant institutional. There's a church as well. That's a neighborhood center, and then there's some Wake County jurisdiction of R30. The development plan kind of wraps around a parcel that will remain in Wake County at this time, and it does contain a cell tower. To the south is R4 conditional district, which is the existing Edgemont Landing neighborhood. To the east, there's some residential subdivisions, but also industrial. Siemens Road and the Siemens facility is there. There's some vacant land. To the west is zoned industrial with Wake County, and that's the home to the future Wake Tech campus. Purpose of a conditional district is to provide some flexibility to depart from our traditional UDO. Allows more complete living and working environment through different approaches to community planning and design. It also gives the board some opportunities to attach site-specific standards, and also allows a developer to provide certain amenities above and beyond our ordinance. The site plan that's attached to this conditional district, as we said, is roughly 202 single-family homes. It attaches to Edgemont Landing on Raven Perch Drive will be the connection. The open spaces for the existing Edgemont Landing and this neighborhood are connected by greenway trails that the applicant previously built in the existing neighborhood and also proposed to be extended through this neighborhood. They also are providing some recreation opportunities, playgrounds, and open space throughout the property. There's a lot of buffers. Overall, the site plan's 6,000 square foot lots. They've asked for a 20-foot setback from the front, which normally the UDO requires 25. So they're asking for that concession, but in return, we're getting 24 acres of open space. They are providing 49 parking spaces for on-street parking. With similar other neighborhoods, they are not allowing just street parking unless you're in a designated parking spot. The amenities include playgrounds, a huge AstroTurf, like a turf grass field for recreation play, benches, dog boxes, a private greenway that it connects to the existing Edgemont Landing greenway as well. 7 conditions are part of this zoning. 5-foot streetscape buffer shall be provided along Edgemont Road, similar to that's provided with Phase 1, which was Edgemont Landing. The development will be in accordance with the approved site plan. The rezoned parcels may be used for and only for single-family detached dwelling units. Improvements recommended by the TIA and comments by NCDOT shall be coordinated with NCDOT and constructed per final requirements. We'll go over the details of their TIA in a few slides. The front and corner setbacks shall be reduced to 20 feet from the 25 that's in the UDO. And then all structures must be in compliance with dimensional standards provided in the approved site plan, and parking in the public right-of-way shall be maintained by the homeowners association. Public utilities, the development of the site will require connection to city water and sewer, which is available nearby. And then the parcels that are not already in our city limits will be annexed. Streets, the applicant's responsible for making the required road improvements to Edgemont Road, which includes sidewalk, bike lane, landscape area, and curb and gutter. It's key to note that Do-It Drive, which is the main road in and out off of Edgemont to all the way to the back of the subdivision, will consist of 29 feet of pavement instead of our normal 27 per the request of TRC. And then there'll be no on-street parking. However, guest parking is provided near parks and kind of woven in throughout the development. Phasing, current plan shows 2 phases. Phase 1 and Phase 2 both have recreation as part of their Phase 1 includes traditional playgrounds and some open space, and then Phase 2 includes like a park with a large turf field and some open space amenities. And as I said earlier, the applicant's providing 24.7 acres of open space while only required to provide 8. And then the applicant is provided to construct certified playground in a neighborhood park with some turf grass. And then the landscaping plan does show where they attach a few homes to the south and Edgemont Landing, they'll do the rear yard plantings of trees and shrubs that are required by our UDO. They're also then providing some street yard 10-foot buffers in places that we do not require it. They're just weaving that in throughout the development plan. TIA, due to the number of dwelling units proposed, they had to do a TIA. This report is reviewed by NCDOT as well as the town contracted engineer. Since all impacted roads are DOT maintained, they would determine if what improvements are needed. Throughout this process, DOT has recommended a 75-foot left turn lane from Edgemont Road into the neighborhood on Do-It Drive, and then also a 150-foot right turn lane at the bottom of Edgemont where you turn onto NC 97 and then Business 64. So there'll be a couple turn lanes added as well as our requirements to Edgemont Road. Comprehensive plan does define this area as S3, restricted growth. It's intended for very limited development or tightly controlled conditions. The sector is generally classified as lands that are not approximate to thoroughfares that are not projected to be high growth due to limited access to the transportation. Generally, these S3 areas are outside of the short-range urban service area, and water and sewer are closer to S1 and 2. In this case, when Edgemont Landing got built in the early and mid-2000s and then finished a few years ago, that extended utilities to that area and made these parcels kind of ripe for development as there's stub connections and utilities. So in this S4 sector, single-family residential developments are appropriate, and that's what they're proposing at this time. Here's a copy of the framework map. Planning Board at their July 20th meeting, Planning Board voted unanimously in favor of the requested conditional district and found the plan is consistent and reasonable with the S3 sector through Principle 6, which is to provide a range of housing opportunities. The applicant did provide a justification, similar density to what they built in just south of here. TRC had some comments on guest parking. They did add those. We actually got additional details on how the open space will be used or preserved. And as I said earlier, they did provide some 2 extra feet of pavement for Do-It Drive that was based on emergency response through TRC comments. Since the applicants addressed all TRC comments, staff is recommending approval of the proposed conditional district. And I can field any questions that you have.
Okay, so open the public hearing. Has anybody got any questions? Any questions from the board?
I have some questions, ma'am.
Sure.
Okay. This is, I guess, more for Brian, I guess. Going back to the conditions that were on the the 7 conditions, how many of those conditions are a step back for us, other than the 20 to 25, or 20, from 25 feet to 20 feet?
Give me one moment.
Sure, that's fine. I'm kind of getting it myself.
So a 5-foot streetscape buffer is a give. That's not required in all the areas that they're providing it. Development in accordance with the approved site plan, has to be done as part of any development plan. The rezone parcels, they are dedicating it to only be single-family detached dwelling. If they wanted to ever come back and amend that plan, it would have to come back before you. TIA improvements are required by our UDO as part of a process for that size of a development. They're asking for a reduced down to 20 feet for the front and corner setbacks. UDO requires 25. And then the HOA creation is what they're doing. They don't have to create an HOA. And then the public parking is maintained by the HOA, so they're not asking for the town to go out and enforce that parking that's with the HOA. It eventually could become town streets, so they're giving us a lot of open space that's not as part of a condition, but it is part of the development plan. And then they did submit designs of the homes, which was not part of our UDO requirements as well.
So the open space is not listed as a condition, it's just something they're having in their plan? And you said something about designs of the homes. I missed that part.
Yeah, so in the link, there are homes of designs of what the homes will look like. It's not part of our required packet. We can't ask them to show us that, but they provided it, and they're very similar to what they built in Edgemont Landing next door.
And then I guess going back to the big plan, 2 questions. It looks like there's access down to Edgemont's Landing on the south side. Is that correct?
Yes, Raven Perch Drive is a stub that's in Edgemont Landing that will extend into this new section of Harmony.
And then aside from that exit point, is the only other exit point right there off of Dewitt Drive?
Dewitt and Edgemont.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. My only comment on that, or I guess one other question then, with it being this S3 area that was kind of noted here in our comprehensive plan, from your planning background and standpoint, does it seem like it meets that classifications for intended for very limited development under tightly controlled conditions?
I'd actually have to say that's where the comp plan needs to be updated, because when the original Edgemont Landing got approved, utilities got extended and got a lot closer to other land. And so as soon as you run utilities into an area, there is then development pressure that happens. And so when Edgemont Landing got built, these parcels were the next development pattern, because you've got stub streets, you've got water and sewer there. And so the timeline changed from when that previous comp plan got developed. But also they're only asking for single-family homes, which does meet the intent of the S3 sector.
Okay, so you kind of yes and no. It kind of maybe doesn't mean that necessarily, but if we had to redo this now, it seems to fit in with what's already in the nearby area.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I think my only comment on that is I do appreciate going back to the conditions. That always helps me out. But I know we've seen this in other developments. But one thing, the first one they always list is no vinyl, and I think that's something I've had problems with in the past in other developments. And so having the open space laid out there. If we have a conditional district, I like to kind of have it spelled out, and even especially with any kind of design standards like no vinyl, that's important to me. I think having that spelled out would be helpful versus just leaving it as well, this is what they say they're going to do. I'd rather have them kind of have that in the conditions, but that's all.
Is the applicant with us, maybe to address that?
Yes, the applicant is on the line.
Gentlemen, you've all been unmuted.
Thanks. I'm going to let one of the guys, this is David Arnold from if there are any questions related to the design or whatnot, but for the vinyl, I'll let someone from D.R. Horton speak to that.
This is Zach Anderson from D.R. Horton. I think what is consistent with other developments in the area and Edgemont Landing itself was a thicker gauge vinyl.
Do you also want to talk about materials for other things on the facade? Because the drawings, or the home design you submitted includes more than just, it shows brick or stone and a mixture of products. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, there will be a mixture of facade types. So, you know, traditional horizontal siding, mixed in with board and bat, brick and stone veneer, and shake as well, and a mixture of colors throughout the neighborhood.
That answer your question?
Yes, well, they said in the things, that's fine. I mean,
I got a question too.
Yes, Commissioner.
It's for all those homes in there, there's only 45 extra parking spots? Is there any, I mean, how many homes total was it?
202. Our UDO does not require any off-site parking spots, so those are all a give by the
There's no
developer.
road parking for celebrations and things like that. I always wonder why you can't go a 30-foot road so you can park on the road, you know? You get fire trucks down the road and EMS and things like that.
They're not allowing any parking on the streets as
Yeah.
part of their development plan.
I don't think that's enough parking spots, but anyway.
That leads in well to a question I had. I thought that I'd heard you say that if you look at the you look at the water allocation application, there's points for on-street parking listed. Certainly, they're creating a lot more parking than what's required. So, I mean, I understand where that might be, but it just was confusing.
Okay.
So, and that's not something I need an answer on right now. Just wanted to tag that for you guys. I'm gonna just kind of repeat Commissioner Lutz's comment, and then what I would say is that I don't know if he got an answer to his question, but I didn't hear the answer that we've gotten from every development that's passed us, or passed this board for the last 8 or 9 months at least. So, questions about, my 2 questions were just that I didn't hear the answer that we historically have heard on vinyl when that was brought up. And that's completely fine. The other one was the on-street parking and the water allocation.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Commissioner Boyette?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I have a question. It's my standard question whenever we get a little bit of design input, or at least some design standards ahead of time. Are these houses going to include raised foundations, or are they going to be slab on grade?
Zach,
There to be slab on grade.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Madam Mayor, just
Yes,
a
sir.
comment that the community directly, I guess on the other side of this, where the church is located, when we went through that development process, part of what was said during that, they were held to some higher, or they offered for some higher standards because they had a commitment to Edgemont Landing, which was directly behind them, that while they were doing a different use, they wanted to add value to that neighborhood. And I would just encourage encourage this crowd. Obviously, you guys are directly tied to the product across the street. I appreciate the product you built. I think it's a nice looking neighborhood, but we're very much interested in increasing the values of our community. So any place that you see to, make increases in value, it's certainly appreciated, and I think you've heard it from at least a majority of the board at this point.
At this point, the recommendations by staff and the conditions that have so far been agreed upon, I assume the applicant is in agreement with those to create the conditional district. So the question now is, there's a concern about parking and vinyl siding. I think that's where we're sitting. Do you have something?
I don't have a question about parking. I'm fine with the parking.
I was just the board. I was just recapping the comments from the board. All right, we're going to close the public hearing, subject to receipt of comments for the next 24 hours.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have no administrative items tonight. We'll move right on into our other business. Item 7A is update on town board committees by town board meeting members. And the first is the technical review committee. We're going to hear from Mayor Pro Tem John Boyette.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There was no TRC meeting this month,
Okay.
so we will resume next month.
All right, great. Wendell Volunteer Fire Department Board of Directors, Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to show it. This is the audit. The audit is done. The audit says that the Wendell Fire Department has completed their audit again this year and are in good financial shape. Moving forward, the other piece that I wanted to update you on as a part of my fire department conversation, week before last, the town of Wendell, we monitor this. We see it every Friday. Saw a spike in, much like lots of other parts of the state, our COVID numbers. We then saw it last week, but kind of in a different way. There's been a lot of conversation. We've received emails, various questions about how things are enforced and how things are done. I say all that and how it ties into the fire department is this. When I went by the fire department today, the last time that I had a conversation with Chief, he talked about the changes that they're making. I think since we last met, Clayton's had a firefighter die from COVID. In addition to that, the family member of a firefighter's passed because of COVID. We've had hot spots pop up around us with other agencies literally to the northeast, south, and it's a long way between here and west, but west, I just certainly imagine there's one. But we've been involved in northeast and south. I expressed a couple weeks ago things that I miss and things that I hope to get back to. I understand that we're in a time where we want people back in school. I certainly want kids back in school. We want a lot of things to go our way. I'm just going to ask the community to do what we're asking every firefighter to do every single day of every single shift that they've worked since March, which is put a mask on. It used to be when you went out. Unfortunately for them and facilities as they are, they're in cramped quarters all the time. So they're wearing masks a lot more often, sometimes inside the station, just to try to protect one another. I desperately want life to go back to normal, but I'm also smart enough to understand that putting a sign on your door and saying it doesn't matter and it doesn't exist won't make it go away any quicker than putting your head in the sand will. Logical steps will. And I'm asking you tonight, if you can't do it because you want to see your kids go back to school or your business is open or a thriving economy, I want John Boyette to sit back beside me. And John can't do that until we get through this in a way that we are reacting. You can go back and look at COVID numbers, and every time we start a reaction or there gets to we get to a holiday, which is more concerning because we're about to get to 3. When we get to a holiday, we just get comfortable, and it's a natural human reaction. What I was reminded of when I talked to the fire department is that they have to go above their natural human reaction to want to take the mask off because it's irritating, or to not want to wear the mask because it's not appropriate right now. Wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart from people, and wear a mask. Literally, the lives of the heroes that your kids wave at when they go down the street depend on it. Thank you.
Great, let's move into our comments tonight. Stay with Commissioner Joyner. It's our habit to start there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You should wear a mask, you should wash your hands, and you should stay 6 feet apart from people. There's a lot of good things that this staff has planned and has had planned for months, and we've slowly killed them as we've watched them have to cancel each one. I'm in no way saying that we have the ability to instantly stop this virus. What I am saying is that we're a small town with big charm. The minutes for our town retreat that are included in tonight's packet listed what do you think big charm means, and we listed a bunch of things, and man, some really cool community values, things that we value, the history of this town, the way that this town came to be, what we envision for the town in the future. Let me tell you, we can't get back there until there's just a concerted effort across the board to take care of each other. I also greatly miss seeing my friends that are above the age of 65. I am an old soul, and we can do this. We can get back there, but just feeling like you're back in town and it's your time off work and you can take a break from all of this, you can. You just got to do it 6 feet away from other people, and generally just a little bit more adherence to this, not because of any other reason than for everybody else and for everything else. If it's not in the front of mind all the time, and I know that I'm beating a dead horse, but there's been a lot of horses that I've beat a lot harder before this, and I know that as a community we can just do what we know we need to do. We all want to get back to normal. There's no quick way back to normal. But there are some simple, easy solutions. And our town staff, as well as our fire department staff, as well as your favorite restaurant, there's only one Petey. There's only one of a lot of things in this town, and they're all precious resources. I can name a list of people that I could just give you their first name. They're all over the age of 65, and half the people listening to me know exactly what I'm talking about. All of those people matter. If we just wash our hands, we might be able to prevent that. I certainly don't know the science of how it all works to prevent it, but I know that when I go to bed at night, I want to be able to go to bed at night knowing that I did everything I could to make it so John Boy that can sit back beside me, and so that he can walk back down Main Street with his kids and not worry about what germs may be spreading to others. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner DeLoach.
Nothing tonight, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Lutz.
Just two things myself. I know we've had a lot of discussion in the past few weeks about the brown bins. I got my mailer this week from the town noting the leaf pickup, and so I just encourage people as we get into the next, and they're already following my yard. I can sympathize with the citizens who have trouble with fitting things into those bins and limbs and stuff like that in the same way too. So pay attention to the schedule, just plan ahead a little bit, making sure that if you're getting leaves up, you're getting them up on those days and not, the weekend before, so that they're ready to pick up on Monday and Tuesday. So just pay attention to those schedules. If you didn't get a flyer, if you didn't get a mailer, I'm sure this will be available on the website, or tell us. I'd be happy to get that information to you as well. And one other thing too is just the trick-or-treat trail is coming up. If you haven't signed up, I don't know if you still can, but just be careful with. I want to tell staff more than anything. I noticed Friday signing up as we did, or last week as we signed up with my family. we signed up and having to add in guests, and I just want to make sure that the Parks and Rec staff is diligent with noticing maybe who signed up and how many guests they added. I'd hate to think that mom signed up herself and then didn't add guests, and then we have an extra 3 or 4 people come with her because they're her kids. So I just would encourage town staff just to make sure they just check those lists. And that was all.
Thank you. Commissioner Tarneski?
No comment tonight, Mayor.
Commissioner Boyette?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First things first, how about that Wolfpack? Second thing, I want nothing more than to be able to come back to the board meetings also. I do sort of feel like a mayor pro tem in exile. But at the current time, it is, this whole COVID thing is really moving through the community. And if you haven't seen it, consider yourself blessed. I will say that I will be glad when it's over. It has affected the fire department and the surrounding fire departments. I don't think anywhere has been completely untouched yet. So if you just keep seeing thoughts, that'd be great. We're not completely insulated from polite society. My wife and I were starting to have the discussion about whether or not we should go to the tree trail or whatever. We saw all the precautions that town staff were putting into the tree trail, splitting it up into smaller groups and limiting the numbers and all that kind of stuff. And by the time we even thought about it, it was completely booked up. I'm sad that we won't be able to attend that this year. But such is the way it is. I would just echo Commissioner Joyner's words: wash your hands, wear a mask, and try to do things outdoors as much as you can. And if you do need to go inside, wear a mask. It really does seem to help. And so that's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our farmers market for 2020 has wrapped up since we last met. I want to express my appreciation to the vendors for their participation. We wouldn't have a market if we didn't have great vendors. And I want to thank town staff. They put it together and have held it together under very trying testing circumstances, and they've also just dealt with the typical weekly tasks related to the market and done it like champs, and I really appreciate that. I look forward to picking up next spring. I wanted to comment real quick. We had 2 comments tonight about parking downtown, and as you can see, in another later agenda item, we are dealing with it. I appreciate those who've sent in comments. We also received some emails and things. A lot of times when things are going on around Wendell, we beg for people to let us know what you think, and I'm happy to see that the downtown folks have let us know that. But we are inventorying, or they are, and evaluating, considering some options, and I think we're going to do the very best we can down there for you. I want to remind you once again, I know everybody's talked about the coronavirus, but I'm going to do that as well, to wear your mask. I've got one on here with a lovely chain made by a little friend of mine right here in Wendell. It's got my name on it. There's a way to go about your daily tasks and do that safely. I am not one to encourage you to go around and be fearful. I think that the rate of recovery is very high, but for those that do not, the outcome is dismal. And we don't want anyone to be one of those. And there's a lot that's not known about those that recover. My husband's on staff at UNC Dental School, and I hear all these webinars that he hears right now, and information coming from them, and various things that he's required to listen to just to be there, and about disease transmission and so forth. And the people that are there that are sick are very, very sick. And I think you need to take that into account and do the things that are necessary, because you know what they are. And I also want to mention, just real briefly, I feel like I keep having to jump in on behalf of the staff. The trick-or-treat trail filled up really fast this year because we are in the midst of a pandemic. And for those of you that decided to behave ugly towards some of the staff, and I became aware of it regarding how fast it was, and they should have done this and they should have done that. You all need to reflect on your priorities and give a little bit of thought to the things that you're saying to a crowd of people that are working very, very hard on your behalf. And if the worst thing that happened to you that day was that you didn't get to sign up for the trick-or-treat trail, you had a pretty good day. And it's time for us to give each other a little more grace than what I saw demonstrated this weekend. I was real disappointed in that. Anyhow, I think we're going to do better as other things come along, and I hope that you have a chance to reflect on that. So, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session to discuss legal advice from the town attorney.
All right, going into closed session.